Hi, welcome to this short video on academic reading. So we're going to look at developing a plan of how you can read actively, because reading academically is very different from reading for pleasure. You have to actively think about what you're reading, look for connections, ask questions, maybe stop and pause over a sentence that's troubling you, maybe look up a word that you don't understand. And the more reading you do, the more you understand the area that you're trying to talk about, which therefore informs your reading. And there's this lovely quote from a literacy expert who says, reading is like breathing in, writing is like breathing out. So we take in this information and then we breathe out, or we produce our thoughts on everything that we've been reading. So let's start off with an academic reading quiz. You might need to pause the video and just have a think about your answers to these 6 questions. So rate them on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is you don't feel confident at all and 5 is you feel very confident. Okay, so you should now have your marks, and look and see where you've got your lowest marks, because they're probably the areas where you need to do some work developing your reading skills. So if it's actually how you read, that's question 1. Questions 2 and 3 relate to finding suitable texts. Question 4 relates to what you're going to do with the information in the text, how you judge the quality of it. And then the last questions 1, 5 and 6 all talk about how you use the information that you've got. So we're going to go through some of the ideas around this. So with academic reading, your reading skills are really important, but they do improve with practice. The more you read, the more you don't trip up over big words, and the more that you realise that you can concentrate better. There's some ways of getting into an article to get an overview before you go straight in at the beginning. And you might find that with some articles you don't need to read from the beginning every word all the way through to the end. So you could try using skimming and scanning. So skimming a text just to get an idea of its overall meaning. Just jump in and read a few little sentences here and there, look at the images, maybe look at the headings, and just, oh yeah, I've got a feel of it now. Maybe start with just the abstract or the introduction, skim through that. Oh yeah, okay. You could also scan for keywords. So you're reading strategically, because you know what you're looking for maybe in this article. If you're reading an article about peer feedback in music performance classes, then you're going to be looking to see, is this actually about music performance? Is it about peer feedback? How are they using it? If it's just quite descriptive and it isn't really telling you anything new, maybe it's not useful for you. So looking through and looking at those words every time peer feedback comes up, what are they actually saying around that? And you might find then that this is the article for me. I'm going to go and read it straight through. You can also just read little bits to get a good general overview. So the abstract or the introduction and the conclusion are a good place to start. Read both of those, and then you can read the first sentence of each paragraph, because generally a well-written article, the first sentence of each paragraph kind of should sum up what that paragraph is going to tell you about. So that should give you an idea as well. Now, if you come across technical or troubling words that keep tripping you up and you can't remember what they are, make a note of them. You might even want to start your own glossary in a spreadsheet, especially if it's a really technical area that you're researching. So I get hermeneutics, hegemony and heterogeneous and heuristic and hubris all mixed up. I can't ever remember them, so I've got them on a little piece of paper above my desk. Every time it comes up, I have a little check, and that's gradually how I learnt the difference in those words. Finding suitable texts can be quite tricky. So you want to search by keywords. Using Google Scholar is a really good idea. And you want to put in some keywords that relate to your research topic and your research question. So if you have a look through Google Scholar, and there's a video linked here which takes you through it, you can put in the words that you're looking for. You can also try and not just put in all of the words that you want, but be a bit more strategic about it. And you can do that using Boolean logic. So with this, if in capitals you wrote peer feedback and if you wrote feedback and conversation, if you were finding out about what people thought about feedback and how they used it, they built it into conversations, feedback and in capital letters conversation would find you articles about that. If you were interested in feedback or conversations, so we would end up with articles which are about feedback, there are articles about conversation, and there are articles about feedback and conversation where both are mentioned. You could put or in between the two words. So you can also then do not. So if you wanted feedback but you didn't want peer feedback, you could write feedback, not peer, and then you would only get things where feedback is mentioned without peer feedback. It takes a while to play around with this. If you put things into brackets, that can help you to have more than one Boolean search term. And if you put things into speech marks, that means that exact phrase. So if I put in feedback and conversation, I'm going to get articles which has both words feedback and conversation in them. If I put them into quotes, I'm going to get the phrase feedback conversation. So not an article where feedback is mentioned in one place and conversation somewhere else, feedback conversation. The not doesn't always work for me, so I tend to use a minus sign, but you have to not put a space in between the minus and the word that you're wanting it to not look for. It's a really good idea to save your search terms, because if you find some great literature and then you don't save your search term, when you go back to find that literature again, if you didn't download it or make a note of it, you need to know how you searched, and it also helps to show how you've narrowed down your work. So here's some examples of Booleans. So feedback or conversation, like I was saying, gives you results where the words feedback or conversation are mentioned. Feedback and conversation, we get feedback and conversation both mentioned. So it blocks out the ones where only feedback is mentioned or only conversation is mentioned. And then if we try this one using brackets, I want feedback and conversation or peer. So that's going to give me anywhere where there is feedback and conversation, and anywhere where there is feedback and peer. Because if I'd have put feedback and conversation and peer, I would have only got articles where those three words appeared. And then here's the one where you use the phrase marks, so the exact phrase, or phase as I've misspelt here, appears. So have a go, get hunting for some treasure. Go and start, write down some key terms, think about the topic, things around the topic, and go and start having some fun and seeing what comes up in Google Scholar. You can also use this in Sage and EBSCO or whatever library system that your university uses. So that should have given you an idea about finding suitable texts, and we talked about active reading. With judging texts, it's quite hard to think about how you think critically about a text. So it's a really good idea to maybe write down what are you hoping to get from the text, and then also think about some questions that you can actually ask of the text. So who is the author? Who do they work for? Are they a good author? Are they not necessarily good, but are they prominent in their field? Therefore, do you trust this source? Do you disagree? Are you unsure? Is there any other work by that author or other people that has the same opinion as you? Can you link it in? And just think about when you've read something, think about what's the main point? What am I supposed to have got from this? And then think, how does that relate to my topic? We can also have an active reading plan. So as well as thinking about how do I be critical about my reading, or how do I find reading, it's the whole approach that you take to looking for and reading your literature. So think about why before you start. Why am I reading this? What questions do I have? What am I looking for? So that's going to help you pinpoint if this article is useful to you or not. And then think about the how. How am I going to do this? Am I going to skim and scan? Am I looking for keywords? How long have I got? If I've only got half an hour, do I want to just start at the beginning and trudge through and then realise I haven't read it all? Have I got to read strategically and try and get bits out of it quickly? And then you've actually got to read it. Don't forget to highlight important words and passages. If you're reading online, maybe in an e-reader, or you're reading a PDF, find out how you can actually annotate it. How can you highlight a phrase? How can you add a comment to that phrase? Make sure that you check meanings as you go along. Make a note of them, like I said, so that you can remember those words. And keep checking back to your questions. Why am I reading this? What's going on here? And it's always important to write some notes. So highlighting phrases is really useful. But then if you go back to them 6 months later, why did you highlight that phrase? So think about, what did I learn? What was useful in here? What wasn't useful? What questions do I have now? What does this link to? What other reading have I done, or other topics does this link to? And have a plan. What should I do now? Do I need to go and reread it? Do I need to check other texts? Is this such a useful text that I should definitely really focus on it and read it in more depth? Do I need to find more texts? And it's a good idea to have a reading log. So you could start a spreadsheet of what you've read, why, what you thought about it, what questions it raised, what interesting keywords might have been in there, and also put as much of the Harvard reference in as you possibly can, because if you go back and want to use it and then you can't find it, you know that you've got enough information written down that you can create the Harvard reference for it. The reading log template and lots of other resources are available at musostudy.com, and you can download all sorts of things, including these little bookmarks that you might want to print out and just have on your desk, above your desk. Take a photograph of it and have it on your phone, or if you're old-fashioned like me and like to read real books, print it out and use it as a bookmark. Thank you.